Nestled deep within the misty hills was the peaceful village of Neora, a land where the birds sang at dawn, the rivers flowed with purity, and the people lived by the wisdom of their ancestors. This was not just a village, it was a home, where every tree had a story, and every breeze carried whispers of old legends. Among its most cherished souls was a young girl named Jowira. Her smile was as warm as the morning sun, and her presence brought calm to even the stormiest hearts. She lived with her mother, Mama Eneli, a gentle herbalist, known far and wide for her healing hands and humble spirit. Everyone loved Mama Eneli, and through her, they came to adore Jowira as well. But the winds of peace began to shift when tragedy knocked. After the death of Jowira's father, Mama Eneli remarried, this time to Chief Borongo, one of the most powerful and respected elders in Neora. With this marriage came a new member into their household, Kwadi, Chief Borongo's son from his previous union. Kwad was not like Jowira. While she was light, he was shadow. While she helped the old and sang with children, Kwad lurked in corners, his eyes always watching, his heart heavy with something unspoken. From the very first day they became step-siblings. Something in the air turned cold. Jowira tried to welcome him, but Kwadi saw her as a threat. In his eyes, she had stolen the love of the villagers, the attention of his father, and even the peace of his new home. Every time someone praised Jowira, Kwadi's envy grew like a fire in dry grass. He saw her beauty as a curse, her kindness as a weapon, her joy as something stolen from him. He never spoke of his jealousy, never admitted his resentment, but inside, it festered. Day by day, Kwada's heart twisted darker, and while Jowira smiled, danced, and brought healing to others, Kwada stood in silence, his mind weaving thoughts that no one could hear. He watched her every move, counted every praise she received, and each time she was celebrated, it felt like a slap across his face. In his quiet rage, a dangerous idea began to take shape, a secret so dark that even the shadows might tremble. And from that day, his life became one mission, not to live in her light, but to erase it forever. What Kwad didn't know was that fate had already written a different ending, one that would shake Neora to its roots. Jowira's days in the village of Neora were filled with warmth and laughter. Wherever she went, smiles followed. She would sing sweet songs to the children under the baobab tree, dance with the women during harvest, and accompany her mother on healing visits across the village. Her hands were gentle, and her heart was even softer. People would say, Jowira has the spirit of the river, always flowing with kindness. She was like the golden sun that touched everyone's life. But while the village cheered for her, someone watched from the shadows, someone who felt the sun never shined on him. Quaid stood always a few steps behind. His eyes, dark and heavy, were filled with things he never said out loud. He saw the villagers greet Jowira with love, offer her gifts, and sing her name during festivals. But for him, there was only silence. No smiles, no praises, no warmth, just cold greetings and quick glances that passed over him like wind through tall grass. With every cheer Jowira received, a crack grew wider in Quad's heart. He felt invisible, unseen, and soon, that hurt turned into jealousy, and that jealousy became a storm inside him. In his mind, everything should have been his, the respect, the praise, even the prophecy that soon shook the village. One evening, under the great moon, the wise elder Zafuno stood in the village square and spoke a prophecy that made every ear stand still. A daughter of the land, he said, will rise when Neora is in great danger. She will be the light that pushes back the darkness. The words spread like wildfire. People whispered, it must be Jowira. Who else could it be? The elders nodded. The children clapped. Even Mama Eneli wept with joy. But Kwade, his heart boiled. How could a girl, his stepsister, be chosen? How could she be the hero when he was the true son of Chief Borongo? He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. That prophecy should have been about him. That future was supposed to belong to him. From that day, he stopped pretending. Every glance at Jowira became sharper. Every word he spoke was laced with bitterness. He began to study her, not out of admiration, but to find her weakness. He wanted to know when she left the house, who she trusted, and how far the village's love for her really went. What started as envy now grew into an obsession. Jowira was no longer just his stepsister. She was the wall between him and everything he believed he deserved. In his eyes, she had stolen his place in the sun, and he was ready to do anything to take it back, even if it meant doing the unthinkable. The festival of the river spirits was the most joyful time of the year in Neora. Villagers wore their brightest clothes, drums echoed through the hills, and songs of gratitude filled the air. Everyone gathered at the banks of the great river Osula, dancing, laughing, and placing colourful offerings into the water, hoping the spirits would bless their homes, their crops, and their families. Jowira was at the heart of it all, her voice rising above the drums as she sang the old songs. Children danced around her, elders smiled at her. Her glow outshone even the sun that day. But someone else stood in that crowd, watching, burning with quiet rage. Quade's smile was forced. His heart pounded, not with excitement, but with a cold plan he had been shaping for weeks. He saw the perfect opportunity in the middle of all the noise and celebration. Everyone was distracted, no one would notice. And when he approached Jowira with soft words and a charming grin, she didn't see the darkness behind his eyes. "Jowira," he said sweetly, "I found something in the forest of Duma. A rare herb Mama's been looking for. Come with me, just for a moment. She'll be so happy if we bring it before sunset." Jowira, always helpful, always kind, didn't hesitate. She trusted him. Why wouldn't she? They walked quietly through the thick trees, the sounds of celebration fading behind them. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Only the rustling leaves and distant river reminded her they weren't completely alone. But Quadi's heart was thundering in his chest. He led her to a patch beneath an old, twisted baobab tree and pointed to some green leaves near the roots. "There," he said softly, "that's it." As Jowira knelt down to collect the herb, still humming a tune from the festival, Quadi's hands trembled. He picked up a heavy rock, the weight of his hatred finally too much to carry. And then, in one swift, brutal moment, he struck. Jowira's song ended. She collapsed, blood pooling in the soil, her breath shallow, her eyes fluttering. But Quade didn't stop. Panic and fear mixed with his rage. He dragged her limp body across the ground, scraping her skin against roots and stones. He dug with trembling hands, sweat pouring down his face. The hole wasn't deep, but it didn't have to be. He tossed her in, cold and still. Her fingers twitched slightly. He ignored it. He didn't want to see it. As the dirt covered her body, he paused only once, to remove the delicate pendant around her neck. It was her father's last gift, a small carved stone with ancient markings. He clenched it in his fist before tossing it onto the loose soil, like a final insult. Then he ran, back to the village, back to the music, back to pretend nothing happened. And beneath that cursed baobab, the earth held a secret no one was ready for. Not yet. Jowira opened her eyes to darkness. Her body was cold. Her chest felt crushed. Dirt pressed against her lips, her nose, her eyes. She tried to scream, but only a choked gasp escaped. The weight of the earth held her down, and fear gripped her like a monster with 1,000 claws. Her fingers twitched, her legs kicked weakly, but there was no room, no air, just soil, silence, and the echo of betrayal. Her heart beat slower, her thoughts blurred. It felt like the end. But then, something shifted. From deep within the silence, a whisper rose, not from outside, but from within the very ground that trapped her. A soft, powerful voice, ancient, echoing through the roots, through the stones, into her soul. "You are not done, child of Neora." Her ears burned. Her heart thumped again, stronger. Her pendant, once tossed onto her grave like trash, began to glow faintly beneath the dirt. A soft golden light pulsed from it, wrapping around her body like invisible arms. And then another voice came, so familiar, it brought tears to her eyes even before she could feel them. "Rise, my daughter. Let the earth mark you, but never bury you." It was her father, Nwele, his spirit, his strength, his love, reaching across life and death to pull her back. Suddenly, Jowira's body surged with something ancient, something fierce. It wasn't just energy, it was life reborn. It was the spirits of the earth, the guardians of Neora, answering her soul's cry. Her fingers began to move with power, her legs pushed, her lungs gasped for air. And then, crack, the soil above shifted. A crack appeared on the grave's surface, small at first, but then another, and another, until the earth trembled, just slightly. A villager passing in the distance paused, sensing something strange, but saw nothing. Not yet. Beneath that twisted baobab, the soil split open, and something began to move. First a hand, then fingers, shaking but alive, covered in dirt, blood, and spirit light. It reached toward the fading daylight above. Then came an arm, then her head, hair matted with mud, eyes burning with fire. Jowira was no longer the same girl who walked into the forest. She had been touched by something older than time. She had died, but not completely. The earth had claimed her, but not kept her. As she pulled herself from the grave, gasping, coughing, trembling, the air around her felt still. Even the birds stopped singing. The forest watched in silence. Something had crawled out of that grave. But it was not just a girl anymore. It was a force the village would never forget. Jowira stumbled from the earth like a shadow reborn. Her body trembled. Her breath was ragged. But something inside her had changed forever. The soil still clung to her skin. But it wasn't just dirt. It was marked. Glowing softly in the moonlight were ancient Mbatu symbols, sacred signs that hadn't been seen in generations. They pulsed gently, as if breathing with her. Her eyes, once bright and full of innocence, now held the storm of everything she had endured. And when she opened her mouth, her voice didn't sound like her own. It carried an echo, like the spirits were speaking with her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked. The forest didn't scare her anymore. In fact, the trees seemed to shift aside. The wind whispered secrets to her ears, and even wild animals stared at her in silence, sensing the spirit within her. Though her legs were weak and her body ached with every step, her soul was burning, alive, fierce, and filled with a strange power. Hours passed before she reached the foot of the mountains, where the land grew cold and quiet. There, in a crooked little hut covered in moss and vines, lived an old woman no one had seen in years. Her name was Mama Tefari, a blind seer people feared and respected. She was said to speak with the ancestors, to see with her heart what others could not with their eyes. The moment Mama Tefari heard Jowira's footsteps, she rushed out with surprising strength for her age. Her head turned toward the sound, and her face twisted in awe and fear. She whispered, "Who walks with the dead?" But when her hands touched Jowira's skin and felt the symbols, she froze, then gasped. Tears welled in her blind eyes. "You are the one," she breathed. "Death could not hold you. You walk with the ancestors." Jowira collapsed in her arms, finally letting the exhaustion win. Mama Tefari cradled her gently like a daughter returned from the grave, whispering ancient words of protection. That night, as the fire burned low, Jowira lay wrapped in warmth, not just of blankets, but of something deeper, belonging. And in her sleep, the spirits came again. They didn't whisper this time. They spoke clearly. "You have been chosen, Jowira. You have died and risen. Now you must rise again, not just for yourself, but for all of Neora." What had crawled out of that grave was not just a girl. It was a prophecy wrapped in flesh, a soul reborn to challenge darkness, and her journey was only just beginning. The days rolled into nights, and the seasons slowly passed. But in the cold shadows of the mountain, Jowira was being reborn all over again. She was no longer the frightened girl buried beneath the earth. She was now a student of power, trained by a woman who had seen more lifetimes than most could imagine. Mama Tefari was blind, but she saw with the eyes of the ancestors. Her hut became a temple, and her words became scripture. Each morning, before the sun kissed the sky, Jowira would rise and meditate with her hands pressed to the soil. She listened, not with her ears, but with her spirit. The earth spirits whispered to her now. They taught her how to feel danger in the wind, how to hear truth in silence, and how to call on strength when her own had failed. She learned how to survive with nothing but leaves and roots. She learned the healing secrets of stones and the language of birds and beasts. The mountain itself became her classroom, but there was more. Mama Tefari taught her how to hold her pain and turn it into power. She helped her understand that her scars were not weakness. They were marks of destiny. "The earth chose you because you listened when others screamed," Mama Tefari would say. "You didn't just survive, you became part of it." Back in Neora, Quaid walked freely, lying through his teeth. With fake sadness, he told the villagers that Jowira had run away, heartbroken, ashamed. He played the victim perfectly. Mama and Nelly, broken with grief, believed him. The villagers mourned the kind girl they thought had abandoned them, and with every passing day, Quade stood taller, prouder, until he began to believe his own lies. But deep within the mountain forest, a storm was building. Jowira watched the moon phases, studied the omens in fire and bones, and waited for the sign. Her heart burned not with hatred, but with purpose. She didn't seek revenge. She sought justice. She didn't want to destroy Quad. She wanted to awaken the truth. The earth spirits had marked her. The mountain had molded her. The wind had whispered her name across the valley, waiting for her to rise. And she would, not as a lost girl, not as a broken soul, but as a force the village had never seen before. She was no longer just Jowira. She was the daughter of the earth, and her return would shake Neora to its roots. The night skies above Neora cracked with thunder, as if the heavens themselves were warning the village. The winds howled through the trees, stirring old memories, as villagers rushed to shut their windows and gather around fires. But in the heart of the storm, someone was walking through the darkness, steady, slow, and sure. She was wrapped in a brown robe, hood pulled low over her face. In her hand, she carried a long wooden staff that hummed with energy. Her footsteps were soft, but every time she stepped forward, the earth seemed to breathe, and the ground trembled just slightly beneath her feet. The air around her was different, thicker, quieter, almost sacred. People peered through their windows, their eyes wide with curiosity and a strange fear. She didn't knock on doors. She didn't speak. She went straight to the center of the village, the bustling marketplace where life pulsed each morning. But this time, it was evening. It was quiet, and she stood still among the vendors who hadn't yet packed their goods. Then she lifted her hand and touched an old woman coughing near a fruit stand. In seconds, the cough vanished. The woman blinked, her chest light, her eyes wide. She fell to her knees. A child with a swollen leg limped toward her. The cloaked woman knelt, touched the boy's foot, and in the blink of an eye, he ran like wind. Gasps filled the market. People dropped baskets. Some cried. Others whispered in awe. "She speaks to birds," someone whispered, as a hawk landed gently on her shoulder. "She walks with no shadow," said another, backing away. Words spread like wildfire. A mysterious healer had arrived, a woman from the mountains, a spirit maybe, a messenger of the ancestors. Quad, now one of the most respected young leaders in the village, sat in the chief's compound when he heard the news. At first, he dismissed it with a scoff, but then one of his guards said, "She carries a staff marked with ancient Mbatu symbols, the same from the old tales." That made him pause. A cold sweat formed on his neck. Back in the market, as more villagers gathered around her, a little girl reached out and gently touched the woman's hand. Her tiny fingers brushed against a pendant, round, silver, and glowing faintly. Her eyes grew wide. "I've seen this before," she whispered. "This necklace. It's the same Jowira wore." Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes turned to the cloaked woman. The storm had arrived, and Jowira, reborn, risen, unbroken, had returned to the land that buried her. This time, not as a girl, but as something far greater. The next morning, a drum was sounded through the village. A call for truth, a gathering of justice. The elders of Neora, dressed in their long ceremonial robes, stood beneath the old judgment tree. The villagers gathered in hundreds, whispering, pointing toward the mysterious woman who had shaken their hearts the night before. Quaid arrived first, confident, smirking as always, brushing invisible dust off his fine tunic. He walked with pride, still sure of his power. When the cloaked woman arrived, all eyes turned. The air felt heavy. Even the birds had gone quiet. One of the elders spoke, his voice steady but curious. "You, who walks with the wind and heals with your hands, reveal your face. Who are you that brings the spirits back to Neora?" Quade stepped forward boldly and shouted, "Yes! Let her remove her hood. Let us see which ghost dares to play with our village." The woman slowly reached up and pulled back her hood. A hush fell over the crowd. Mouths dropped open. Gasps echoed through the air. Someone dropped a calabash. An old woman screamed, and Mama Eneli, heart overwhelmed, fainted on the spot. Quaid stepped back, his eyes wide, his skin turning pale. No, she's dead," he mumbled, stumbling as though he had seen a real ghost. She was buried. She can't be." But Jowira stood firm. Her face was calm, her eyes fierce, but not hateful. She looked around at the villagers who once loved her, who once mourned her, and now stood frozen in disbelief. "I am Jowira," she said, "the daughter of Eneli and Ngwele." Her voice was clear, her presence unshakable. She told them everything, not with revenge in her tone, but with truth. She spoke of the festival, of the forest, of the herb that never existed. She told them of the rock that struck her, the cold soil pressing down, the last breath she nearly took. She raised her pendant, her father's heirloom, still glowing softly. "I died, but I was not meant to stay buried," she said. She led the elders, the villagers, and a trembling Quaid deep into the forest of Duma. There, beneath the twisted baobab, she pointed to the shallow grave. The elders stepped forward, digging slowly, carefully, and there they found it, pieces of the robe she wore that day, torn and stained. The villagers gasped. Some wept. Others turned their eyes to Quaid. Jowira looked at him, no anger in her face, just a quiet storm. "I forgive you," she said gently. "But the earth remembers." The wind picked up, the baobab tree creaked, and for the first time, Quade said nothing. The trial was over. The truth had spoken. That very night, as the stars disappeared behind dark, angry clouds, the sky above Neora turned a deep shade of red, like blood soaked into the heavens. It was unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. The wind roared through the trees, and even the animals hid in silence. Something ancient was stirring. The earth itself was awake. The village elders gathered under the moonlight, their faces solemn. Elder Zafano, the oldest and wisest among them, stepped forward with his staff in hand. His eyes were shut, yet he spoke as though he saw everything. "The earth has heard the truth. Now let the earth be the judge," he declared. Quad, no longer smirking, was dragged by two strong men to the very place he once believed would hide his secret, the twisted baobab of judgment. His hands were tied with sacred ropes, his eyes filled with fear. The villagers followed, their faces tight with anger, sorrow, and disbelief. As Quad stood under the great tree, thunder rumbled overhead. Lightning struck a stone nearby, shattering it into dust. The ground beneath him trembled, and a sharp wind cut through the forest like a blade. The spirits were watching. The earth was listening. Then it happened. With a deafening crack, the ground beneath Quaid's feet split open slightly, not enough to swallow him, but just enough to show its power. From the cracks, a thick swarm of fire ants, golden red and glowing like embers, poured out in a circle around him. Quaid screamed, struggling against his bindings, but the ropes held him in place. The fire ants did not kill him. They swarmed over his legs, arms, face, biting him with sharp stings of justice. The pain was unbearable. He cried out, begged, pleaded. The people watched, some with tears, some with anger, some simply silent. When it was over, the ants disappeared into the cracks as suddenly as they had come. The earth closed and the winds died down. Quad collapsed to the ground, shaking and whimpering, his skin covered in red welts and scars. His face no longer held pride, only shame. Elder Zafuno stepped toward him, his voice low but powerful. "You buried an innocent child to steal her light, but the earth remembers everything. You are no longer part of us." With that, the village elders placed a black mark on Quaid's forehead, a symbol of betrayal, and declared him exiled forever. From that day, he was no longer called Quad. He was known only as the one who buried innocence. He walked away from Neora, scarred, broken, and alone. Wherever he went, the earth beneath his feet never felt steady, and the village? It breathed a little easier. Justice had been served, not by sword, but by spirit. Jowira, now known as Mwana wa Ardi, the daughter of the earth, chose not to claim power or sit on a throne. She had no desire for the title of leader. Instead, she embraced a greater purpose, to protect and nurture the land that had saved her. With Mama Eneli by her side, they built a healing sanctuary where the villagers could come for medicine, wisdom, and comfort. Mama Tefari, the blind seer who had guided Jowira in her rebirth, joined them to teach the ancient ways of the spirits. Together, they formed a bond that was as strong as the earth itself. Jowira devoted herself to the children of Neora. She taught them the wisdom of the earth spirits, the ways of healing, and the importance of staying connected to the land that provided them with everything. The young girls especially grew strong under her teachings, learning how to defend their homes, their people, and their sacred land. She trained them to walk with grace, to stand tall in times of adversity, and to never allow darkness to steal their light. Over the years, Jowira's legend grew. It spread from the village to neighboring lands. Her name became a symbol of resilience, of how one can overcome death itself and rise again. She was no longer just a girl. She was the embodiment of the earth's strength and wisdom. Mwana wa Ardi became a title that represented everything Neora stood for: hope, rebirth, and the unwavering spirit of the ancestors. But even as her legacy flourished, Jowira remained humble. She never sought glory. She knew her true purpose was to be a guardian, not a ruler. She spent her days in the sanctuary, helping those who were ill, guiding the young, and keeping the land sacred and whole. She would often walk barefoot, her feet touching the earth, feeling the pulse of life beneath her, as if the land was still speaking to her, still guiding her. And as the years passed, the story of Jowira was passed down from one generation to the next. On stormy nights, when the wind howled through the trees, the villagers would gather around the fire and listen carefully. They'd whisper to each other, "That's Jowira, speaking to the earth, watching over us." Her spirit, they believed, was still with them, keeping the land safe and guarding their hearts. They knew the earth would always remember her, and as long as the storm raged, her voice would never fade. Jowira's legacy was more than just a tale. It was a living reminder that no matter how deep the grave, no matter how strong the darkness, the spirit of one chosen by the ancestors could never be buried. It would always rise again, just as she had. If Jowira's story has touched your heart, reminded you of the strength that lies within us all, and inspired you to rise above your struggles, then I ask you to share this message of resilience with the world. Just like Jowira, we all have the power to overcome life's deepest challenges and emerge stronger, wiser, and more determined. So, if you believe in the power of the human spirit, the importance of kindness, and the strength of standing up for what's right, then take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear Jowira's story, someone who might be feeling lost or alone. Let her legend inspire them to find their own strength. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We have many more powerful stories like Jowira's coming your way. Stories that will light up your heart and remind you of the beauty and resilience of the human soul. Thank you for being part of this journey, for watching, and for spreading the message of hope. Together, we can make this world a better place, one story at a time.